So what we prepared for this evening is four, call it questions, statements, topics more in general, that we as a student group prepared for the speakers. Each question connecting, in our views, most with the experience of either of the speakers. The questions deal with the necessity of border control, starting with that, the implementation of current policies in practice, how is border control executed more in general, but then look at also practical sides, and finally talk about the legitimacy of current migration policy.
And then we can have a criminalization of people who cross borders because they don't have the right papers. I mean, in the old terminology, we might have talked about irregularity in migration. Now we talk about illegality. This is already the difference. And so the question is not so much, do we need border controls? But if we have border controls, how do we deal with it? Do we do it in a human rights or conformity, or do we do it in a way which we would consider if we were confronted outside? It's always interesting to see when we travel abroad, we are shocked if we are even asked for having to need a visa. Yes? We were shocked when we were asked to have any biometrics. Yeah? Now we ask them, generally, from everybody to want to enter the European Union. We are. And that, I think, is, of course, there's also a side for us as European citizens. As more we have border controls, we will have also controls of our own citizens. We are losing our own freedoms by more and more controlling the outside. I mean, if we talk about Frontex, we will very soon have more and more the issue when you want to leave as a European citizen to go abroad, that we will be checked and noted when we go abroad. So Europe will not be only a fortress Europe, but it will be a sort of prison where we as European citizens also are faced with this. So even if we would like to have border controls, I think we have to be very careful how we execute them. So it's that is, I think, the main issue. What are we doing, and also what are we facing as European citizens ourselves?
Our current system, world system, is based on borders. So even if we think, or one day we want to have a borderless world, we're still confronted with the situation of having borders right now, and we have to deal with them in some ways. And I think the question you raised first was very interesting. You said, do we need to protect our borders? And I was thinking, why on earth should we protect borders? What's a border like? How can you protect the border, and what kind of profit does the border have from being protected? I think border protection, or whatever we mean with it, is supposed to protect the people living in it, being in it. And then I think the question turns around in what is actually protecting the people living within these borders. What is helpful for them? And I think there can be quite some aspects of border management and border control that can be useful. And when I was thinking today, what shall we say about border management, I was actually thinking, why do we always first think about migration? There's other things that's happening at borders. For example, with the border management, you can ensure that the fair trade bananas that go inside your country are having less tariff than the non-fair trade bananas. Or you can ensure that toys that are harming children cannot enter or whatever. And then the next question is whether you want to use the border or on the control that you have for not getting these bad toys and whatever, and the bad bananas and so on, whether you want to use this border as well for controlling who gets inside or not. And then once you start thinking about that, you of course get to much trickier questions, like who's supposed to get in? Who has the better reasons for getting in or out? Is it me because I'm moving to Belgium because of work? Is it my husband who moves to Belgium because of me? It's purely emotional. What do you do with that? It's not a good reason or what? And I think that's where the trouble lies. Since our governments have said they want to define who's getting in and, well, maybe soon who's getting out, who knows, then the question is who, and in which way is this dealt with? And I think that's a very important question that is not really easy to answer.
We see over the last years how the discourse, the anti-terror war and the protection against illegal immigration and things are put together to create a quite dangerous situation, especially for people moving out there. in the open sea. And just to give you a number, maybe that's not aware of everybody, we are talking about thousands of dead people or disappearing around the fortress Europe that we created. Well, occasionally, yeah, because it wasn't ever meant to be like that. But because we gave the water protection to the hands of military people, you will tell us more about that, and military thinking is behind that. So we have an escalation, we have shooting, we have naval units operating, diverting boats or stop boats in the middle of the night somewhere, and we have people drowning, disappearing, things like that. This is, for me, the dangerous thing, that with every boat drowning there, and Europe tries to turn a blind eye on that question of human rights. With every drowning boat is also part of our European identity.
To make it clear, what does this regulation then say? It basically says that when, for example, an Estonian border guard is on a joint operation in Italy, he has executive powers to, for example, he can use force, he can carry weapons, that's executive, but he does so under Italian law in that case. Well, it's a technicality, but he is not allowed also to refuse people access to the territory. That is still a national border guard. So you're right, I think that we should keep a close eye on Frontex because it has a potential to develop in something much bigger. For the moment, it still isn't. But what I think is that we should really keep an eye on the policymakers and also the lawmakers. And in that sense, the European Parliament itself is also not, was actually playing a part in that adoption of the Rabbit regulation. That was before your time.
That was exclusively the national parts of the Coast Guard or so, or protecting teams. So we have here a tendency towards building up forces that could react on a European level to whatever kind of crisis first. And then secondly, all this happens without efficient control through the parliaments. And not through the national parliaments, and not through the European Parliament, because they have only to decide on the budget of the whole thing, but we don't have any details on the strategic and the details of the operations out there, because it's secret.
It is two sides of the coin. With losing borders between the member states, we created the borders outside, or a stricter border outside. Now, as such, I would say there is nothing wrong with that in principle, because we had the borders also crossing for a long time, and it quite romantic, let's say, still with stamps between Austria and currency change, or Italy, etc. However, at that time, with the exception of the Berlin Wall, it was quite a free border, actually. I mean, it had even what I would say this romantic passport control, etc., but we had a right in principle to move across the border. And there, I think it's the difference. We have still this feeling of having this right to move for us outside, to cross the border, but we have created a new wall deciding who is allowed to come in. And that's why I would say, with a creation of a European nation state, to some extent, with all its limits, we will have also European borders. But the question is, are we a hospital area with open borders for people from outside, or are we a sort of creating a sort of island, in the way like Australia also has created, but they are already by geography, an island situation where they control their borders. And I think there we have the human rights aspect. How do we deal with our borders?